Hi, my name is Don, creator of Surviving the Intimate. Today I'm here with Matt Thompson and Amy Foster. Amy is going to be the co host of Surviving the Intimate, and Matt is one of my PIs and good friends that helps me out in the field and also helps with the rescues. So today we're here to tell you why we do what we do and why each one of us want to be a part of this project. So we'll start with Matt. We're going to ask Matt some questions here. He doesn't know what's coming yet. Can you tell us your first name
Matt.
and what is your full-time occupation?
Self-employed between the training and instructing and the real estate is pretty much keeps me pretty busy.
Training and instruction for
Firearms,
firearms,
safety.
and you also
All of
do I was going to say you also do self-defense and stuff like that, right?
Yeah.
Safety awareness.
Yeah, do safety awareness, situational awareness. We do it from every level, working with young kids from hunter safety all the way up through adults licensed to carry. We work with teachers and school systems to get them licensed and trained up to protect our kids. The most recent certification that we've gotten lately is through the National Association of Realtors, providing the Safety Matters class for real estate agents also.
So it's safe to say that we're both content experts when it comes to doing these rescues and helping people then.
Yeah, and the courts feel that way. So I've been told.
Well, as long as you're on the right side of the podium.
Right?
And then,
This is true.
why do you want to be a part of Project Rescue and Surviving the Intimate?
I think it's a great way to give back to the community. And it's one of those things where it's not talked about. And of course, in my line of work, I deal with this a lot. And I've 98% probably, or roughly close to, of my clientele are females that have been in a bad situation of some kind, didn't have the ability, the know-how, didn't have the skills or the tools to protect themselves. They didn't have the outlet or the resources to understand where they could go, or that there was somewhere to go. So this is something that is a fantastic opportunity for gals and guys, but gals more often than not, from what I see, having a place to go and somewhere to reach out to and get what they need.
And so, have you ever been affected or your family been affected by domestic violence?
No, not so much. Not in my upbringing type of a thing. So there's been some effects that, in some regards, yes. But I was raised in a pretty straight arrow home, so that wasn't something that was particularly in my campus.
And in being a part of this organization, what has affected you most so far?
Probably the overwhelming amount of abuse and things that is taking place out there that is just kind of buried or just swept under the rug, like it doesn't exist, or it's not that bad, or that kind of a thing. That's one side of the coin. The other side of the coin is the ones that are just afraid to leave. They just don't feel like, even if they have, if you lay a plan out for them, as we have at one point, and they still just have that fear, or they go back to that same situation, return to it. It's a staggering thing.
And what would you like to see change if we could change something, if we could get people together and make a change? What would you like to see change?
That's a really broad question. I think, and this is kind of a blanket statement, goes with this, but it kind of goes with the judicial system. Obviously, being an investigator and being part of the criminal system for so long, what I'd like to see is more enforceability, as far as if there's a conviction handed down, and when it comes time for sentencing, that the sentence actually sticks, that it's actually followed through with. That would hopefully get some recovery for some of these folks.
And Do you think Project Rescue and Surviving the Intimates, I know it's controversial, and I know that we've had some struggles with our city leaders and stuff like that of okaying what we do. Do you think it is a good thing for our community?
Absolutely.
Well, let's move on to Amy. We're going to talk about Amy. Amy is my wife. She is also going to be the co-host. And Amy has a story she'll tell us a little bit about later. But right now, can you give us your first name?
Amy.
And what is your full-time occupation?
I'm a stay-at-home wife.
And why do you want to be a part of Project Rescue?
I want to be a part of Project Rescue because I am a 2-time survivor of domestic violence.
So, how were you affected?
I went from one marriage that was bad into another marriage that was bad. And
Now, these were before me, though.
yes. Before Dawn. I went from one to another, and both of them were physical, emotional, mental, and it affected me and my children.
And are you out of that situation now?
Yes.
And did the system provide much help?
Not at all. My second husband had run-ins with the law before, and they were scared of him. The police were scared of him, so they were no help.
And what do you think? Is Project Rescue a good thing for the community?
It's a very good thing for the community because, like I said, my second husband had the police scared of him, so whenever I would call the police, they would roll up, roll their window down, holler at him to just leave, and they wouldn't even get out of the vehicle, make a report or anything. With Project Rescue, we actually go in and the abuser doesn't scare us. You know, our guys that go in, they're not scared to go in and get that victim out of the
I
situation.
wouldn't say we're not scared. 'Cause that is law enforcement, and everybody else will tell you that's the most dangerous time. That is the most dangerous situation to go into. That's worse than going down to South LA in the middle of a gang fight.
And I understand that, but our people are not going to back down. They're going to go in and get the victim and get them out safely.
Right. We're going to use all of our resources available to plan a safe extraction and execute a safe extraction. Because the last thing we want to do is anybody ever get hurt.
Correct.
And so now, how would something like Project Rescue changed your life if it was available when you were going through this?
If it was available whenever I was going through both of my situations, first, if it would have helped, if Project Rescue was available in my first marriage, I probably would not have gone into my second marriage because the second husband helped me with get out of the first one, you know. So if Project Rescue was available to get me out, get me to a safe location, get my children to a safe location, then I would not have had to deal with the second husband.
Right. Because you felt obligated, as most victims,
Correct.
to commit to this person who rescued you or saved you from one animal and became one himself.
Correct.
Matt, just out of curiosity, do you know how long it takes for a victim to get their perpetrator to the courtroom?
Depending on the severity of the charges, most of the time I've seen it's typically 30 to 60 days would be probably my guess.
And is that for the protective order, or is that for the trial?
Yeah, that's trial more. So, and I'm normally working on that side of things typically. The protective orders, sometimes depending on the severity of it and the response, it also depends a lot of times on just the department. Your smaller, more rural areas, sometimes they're really quick to respond, and sometimes they're very slow to respond. In your larger departments, in your larger areas like San Antonio, the wheels turn pretty consistently, depending on the severity of it. From the side I've seen, but by the time it goes to trial, it's what actually happens. Is there the affidavit of non-prosecution? Do the courts accept the affidavit of non-prosecution? Has the victim changed their mind? Has the victim already tried to go back home, or already has gone back home, even against a protective order? There's a lot of uphill battles, and kind of like with what you're saying is, you probably wouldn't have married the second husband if it wasn't, for that situation, because that's where a lot of them it's a money issue. He's the breadwinner, so they don't have anything. They can't take care of the kids. Fear, or those kinds of things. They say time heals all wounds. Those wounds might not be healed up, but fear and I can muscle through, or it was, a million different stories of why, and then they tend to go back. And so by the time I see it from an investigative standpoint, a lot of times that's what we're up against, and that's a lot of times 30, 60 days down the road.
Well, would it surprise you to know, as an investigator, by the time you get involved with an attorney, yes, 30 to 60 days is probably a reality. But we have several of our girls who have cases sitting at the district attorney's office that have been there for more than 2 years.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
From the time of the actual assault,
Yeah.
it's now over 2 years, and they still have not been to a courtroom, nor
Yeah.
have they even been assigned a trial date.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me. 30 to 60 days for that initial hearing, where we're probably going to do a motion for discovery and all those things. So I mean, that's initial contact. That's not the actual hearing by any means.
So, and then another thing is, would it surprise you to know that most cases in Bexar County are given probation with deferred adjudication?
Yeah, no, that doesn't surprise me at all. I've seen that a lot.
But now, if you kick a dog, you could get a felony and jail time. But if you
Absolutely.
assault your spouse, I mean, we had 35 murders in San Antonio last year, and then the same thing in 2018. So that's 70 lives. They're worried. The coronavirus obviously has kept our survivors from coming today, but more than 5,000 women and children and a few men die every year from domestic violence. And people sweep that under the carpet like it's nothing.
Mm-hmm.
They don't. It's such a small drop in the bucket. But in Bexar County, we had more than 10,000 domestic violence calls last year and 35 deaths.
And it's interesting when you bring that up, to kind of throw something on there with that, when you brought up the animal thing, and so for the viewers out there, rescuing dogs is one of my things also. All of our animals are rescues. We have quite a few of them. But it's interesting when you bring that up, because you're right. You kick a dog, you beat a dog, you mistreat a dog, you got a felony, and then someone puts it on social media and you get hate mail, death threats.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting that you can get death threats and all that stuff in that capacity, and terroristic threat or any of the charges that could be brought against that person doesn't happen. Yet it's kind of correlates, interestingly enough, that so you got Amy in a bad situation and Amy's scared for her life, then turns around, and so she's not really getting the help or what she needs from the system in a timely enough manner that she feels safe, yet these continued threats are there, and we have the laws, the stuff's in place, but it's not being acted upon.
Well, and here's something else that Amy can speak on is, one of the things that's most screwed up in the state of Texas is 9 out of 10 times the police will ask the victim to leave the house with or without the children, and they're not usually the breadwinner. The victim's usually not the breadwinner, but in Texas, the police will not make the abuser leave. I don't know if it's a legal aspect. I don't know if it's because it's easier to talk the victim into going to the shelter or what it is, but how many times did you have to leave your house
With
behind?
my first husband, I left 9 times. And the bad part was the house was in my parents' name. We rented the house from them. but I still had to leave with my children.
Yeah, and I can speak intelligently to that to a point without getting crazy. I'm, I'm not a lawyer, so I can't give legal advice or whatnot. So,
Oh yeah,
don't
let's
take
put
it
that
way.
discllaimer out there.
Yeah,
We are not lawyers.
Yeah,
We are not
definitely
certified
lawyers.
counselors, and we are not any type of law enforcement. We are just people trying to do a good thing. So always consult with an attorney first.
The hard part, but speaking intelligently to it, being a real estate professional, Texas eviction laws are very, very difficult, and they are in most states and whatnot. But I mean, I currently have a home right now that is sold, and to save my life, we can't get the people that are in the house to leave, and they haven't paid rent in over a year now. And with the coronavirus, the only thing we're actually getting from the courts at this point in time is that please hold off on any and all evictions for 30 more days. These people haven't paid. We're talking in excess of $10,000, well over $10,000 that the homeowner is suffering and losses, and the home is sold. I mean, I have a legitimate contract ready to go. The contingency is that the squatters and the people in the home need to be vacated first. So in that situation, and this is what I've seen over and over and over, is if they have you leave, you're not going to go back. You just got stomped. If he leaves, he's going to come back, and they're going to have to come back. And they don't have anything realistically an enforceable document that can enforce you have to go.
But so I have an argument to that, because they do put them in handcuffs, take them to jail.
Absolutely.
And don't give them bail to get out.
Absolutely.
You know,
Absolutely.
or bond to get out.
Yeah.
If they would have taken him to jail instead of, it was more of a threat.
Mhm.
If we take one of you to jail, we take both of you to jail.
Yep. And I've
You
heard
know,
that a lot.
Yet I'm the one that had the marks, the bruises,
Mhm.
and whatever. But they say, well, you leave,
Hmm.
he stays, whatever. And like you're saying, because he won't come back, or he'll come back, I won't come back. There's a way to keep him from coming back. Put him in jail, don't give him a bond, until the victim can get a place that she feels safe, or get anything in place, a piece of paper or a protective order. It's a piece of paper. It may not be safe, but maybe she
Absolutely.
can go somewhere where she can be safe.
Well, and that's the breakdown of society and the things in the system. Because I agree with you. I mean, you're absolutely spot on. And the hard part is our judicial system, the way it works. They have a right to a fair trial and a right to face their accuser. And so, I mean, and it's pretty obvious when you got the bruises, you got the marks, absolutely. And that bond, that cash promise to appear in court and have his day, is how the system works. And it's a flaw in the system. I agree. It's a total flaw in the system. Now, how we change that, what we do, that's kind of, I guess, why we're sitting here at the table discussing this. Because, and we hear it every time, too. The new DA comes in and says, we're going to crack down on this. And they do crack down on it for like 2 weeks. And then they realize their load is so heavy, they got so much going on, they can't keep up. And then you get, I'll just use it for the excuse right now, then you got coronavirus. So we're just going to close all the courts. We're not hearing any trials, anything at all for the next 30 days. We're just shutting down.
So now, I'm glad you mentioned that, because I got an email from CASA, and I got one from several different organizations that are out there out there that are supposed to be helping children and victims of domestic violence, women and children, right? They're closed and working from home, getting paid.
Mm-hmm.
They can no longer go out and visit. They can't do checks or anything else. But they're still going home, working from home, still getting paid. Who's protecting all of these people that are in need?
Nobody. And when they're behind closed doors because of the coronavirus, everybody's kind of staying at home, not getting in public, going into public. That's when the abuse is going to be worse, because you're in an enclosed space together for a long time. And who's going to go and protect that victim or those children?
Mm-hmm.
Because it's going to be bad, because they're in enclosed space together.
And the finances are getting
And the
tighter,
finances are
so
tight.
the stress is going to get harder.
Yep.
Absolutely.
And then the other thing you hit on a while ago was the financial side of things. You know, most victims, people ask, why did they go back? Why do they stay? Well, most of the time they're not allowed to have a job. Most of the time they have no way to leave. They don't have.
They have no resources.
They don't have enough resources to leave.
Yeah.
And in many cases that we have helped do the rescues, the abuser cancels the car insurance or reports their car stolen. So now they have no way of getting the kids to the doctor. They have no way of getting the kids to school. They have no way of getting to a job. So they run out of resources, and then the court threatens to take the kids away and give them back to the abuser because, well, he or she has the means to get them to school, has the means for childcare, has the means to get them to the doctor. So how is the system designed or set up to help the victim when all of the pendulum swings to the abuser's side? How do we fix that? And nobody wants to talk about it. This is controversial. I've already received some nasty messages about even doing this over the last year, especially over the last 3 weeks since I found out we were going to have the TV show.
I'm going to open this can of worms and shut me down if you don't like it. I really firmly believe a lot of the problems we have has started in our education system. I think our schools are so screwed up, it's unbelievable. And I say that because when I teach and instruct, which is what I do on a regular basis, like I had mentioned to you the other day, I ask the question a lot of times when I want people to be aware of what their rights are, what their responsibilities, what they can and can't do. Some people just don't know and they just don't get it from a certain angle. But when I ask really basic questions like, what is the one building in the state of Texas that belongs to the people? And the number one answer I get is the Alamo. And I sit there and go, oh, okay, no, the Alamo does not belong to the people. And the next biggest answer I get is, my house? Yes, your house belongs to the people. Anybody can walk in and out anytime they want. We have a major problem in our education system where people aren't educated. They don't know that there are resources or how the resources work. They do what they're told to do. We have so many laws on the books now that you can sidewind. I mean, just case law alone, there are attorneys that specialize in case law. I mean, that's just what they do, and they're geniuses. They're brilliant. And of course, that's the attorney you want to get if you can afford it. And so that kind of comes back to what you're saying, resource-wise, they're cut off. And then you put it on top of a coronavirus or anything else. If they have money, is there anything on the shelf? If they can get there.
Correct.
And all those kinds of things. And you know, it's like they say, it's a positive feedback loop. You get yourself into that situation. Now you don't have health insurance. Now you get sick. Now you can't make it to work because you don't have that great of a job to begin with. So they fire you. Now the little bit you did have, you lost. And it really just puts people out in the street and makes them homeless in a situation. Well, I guess the question I have to come back to is how do we fix this? I think it needs to start in the education system. I mean, kids need to learn how to balance a checkbook, for crying out loud, and manage finances so that they can understand what they're doing, why they're doing what they can and can't afford. And I deal with this as well as just the safety and security on the real estate side of stuff. It's amazing how many people, when I set them up with my lender, have no idea or understanding of what credit is, how credit even really works. They think they do because of Credit Karma and social media and all these things, but that's not how credit really works. That's not how. They don't understand debt to income ratio. You even use the words DTI a lot of times, and people are like, DTI? Is that like the coronavirus? No, man, it's your debt to income. And so it's education, and I'm hoping, because I know kind of obviously where we're going with things as Surviving the Intimate, and this is a series, is going to be about education.
So, Matt, I want to touch on something. I want to talk about something that you touched on a while ago about the evictions and squatters' rights. Can we talk about squatters' rights? Because Dawn and I have come across some different situations where we've had an issue with squatters. So what are squatters' rights?
Now that's where I'm not really an expert of any means. So unfortunately, with squatters, you call them squatters' rights, and I chuckle because it is. It's like this unwritten privilege where they do have this right, and yet they have no right. I mean, in the state of Texas, specifically in the state of Texas, from a legal standpoint, I cannot contract for anything that would exceed 364 days, okay, by law, unless it's in writing. It must be in writing, and that's why we use promulgated forms that are written and provided to us by attorneys, and they're updated and whatnot, and of course they're pretty lengthy and detailed. So now there's nothing there whatsoever, and all of a sudden this person has all these rights, yet they don't have the responsibility to pay the rent, they don't have the responsibility to pay the mortgage, they don't have the responsibility to pay the taxes or to maintenance or to upkeep or to continue the electric, yet how the homeowner is also in the position where, let's say the water shut off, and I'm not saying San Antonio, I don't know here,
Right.
but from different places I have lived, there are cities, if your water shut off for in excess of 30 days, the city will come in, take over, and condemn your home and take your home from you and kick you out. And they can kick you out because they want to take your property really, really quick. But by God, if you want to get somebody out of that house, it's months and months and months sometimes, and ridiculous amounts of money that you got to pay attorneys and to the courts for someone to say, okay, now the constable or the sheriff's going to go out there and tell them to get out of the house. And that could be 2 or 3 more processes as well that I've seen in there. So as far as actual rights go, I've never been issued anything in writing.
And
I'm not saying it does exist. It's just what
and
I
I'm
know.
glad that you touched on the money with evicting, because a lot of the victims, if they're trying to get rid of their abuser, get them out of their house or whatever, even if they're not on the lease, they still have to evict them.
Absolutely.
And it's going to cost them a lot of money. It's going to cost them attorney's fees, things
Yep.
like that. Don, what is your take on the squatters' rights?
Well, you know that we've come across these where a girl has invited a guy or a guy has invited a girl to spend the night. And then they kind of just begin to move their stuff in. And rather it even be we've had them as quick as 3 days and 5 days where we've called the cops because boyfriends have tried to move in with girls that are vulnerable. And we've called SAPD, we've called Bexar County, and
We had that one recently.
right. And then we had one here a while back where SAPD wouldn't do anything until he threatened or attempted to assault me. Now, as a licensed bodyguard, we have the right to protect our angels. And for those out there watching, when we have a survivor, we have a victim, or we have someone who joins the organization, we do not refer to them as victims. We do not refer to them as survivors. We refer to them as our angels. So that terminology you will hear quite often. She had dated this guy off and on for a few weeks, and she invited him to come over to her house because him and his mom are supposedly having a fight. Well, she invited him over to stay one night at her house, a maximum of a couple of nights, and he was supposed to leave. Well, on the 3rd day, he didn't want to leave. So she calls me in a panic. And SAPD came out there the first time, and SAPD told me, look, she invited him into the house, whether it's just for dinner or for tea or whatever. Once she invited him across the threshold, he now falls under the Texas squatters' rights. And I'm like, listen, he's not on the lease. She's on the lease. I'm on the lease because I co-signed for her unit. And he said, well, until he does something or you go down and file for illegal eviction, we cannot trespass him or criminally trespass him or anything else. And the first officer left. Okay, no problem. Well, we're in there and we're moving his stuff to the garage because that's where he's going to stay while we evict him. He decides he's going to get handsy. He threatened to put his hands on me. I told Amy, dial 911 because one of us is going to need medical attention, right? while on the phone, Amy's on the phone with 911. He's trying to get back into the house where she's at. And I'm standing in the way. Well, then he put his hands on me and hollered he was going to kick my ass. So, at that point, 911 heard that. Then we were able to criminally trespass him, but we could not criminally trespass him on her behalf because she invited him over for dinner and to stay 1 or 2 nights while his mom cooled down. So do I think that is a really crappy law? Or is it the fact that SAPD did not want to enforce it? I'm not sure because we don't have an officer, and I had reached out to see if Chief McManus would attend this, but obviously they're all busy with the coronavirus and everything, so
I got a question. It might be dumb, but I'm just curious because Amy and I, what you're saying, what Amy and I are kind of talking and chuckling about back and forth on this as we use the word squatters' rights. Does that exist? I mean, other than a theory, is it something that's actually on paper? Because and the reason I say that is, in our next episode, maybe that's something we definitely need to touch back on and do some homework, some more homework on. Is there something in writing of what that is? Because there is this unwritten rule of rights. I mean, I'm dealing with it right now, and you guys have dealt with it, and so you deal with it on a domestic violence situation versus in a real estate transaction. So yes, it absolutely is real. But is there something actually in writing? Do we know?
I
don't.
I was just looking on the internet while you and Amy were talking, and no, I cannot find anything that justifies a boyfriend or a girlfriend or a fiance or something like that as a squatter. And now I'd have to look into it deeper, or go down to SAPD or have an officer here to tell us.
And we can look into that.
But
We
you're
can
right,
do a
that
little
should
more
I think we
homework.
should.
That should be a whole nother
Because,
episode.
you look at it, you think about it this way too, and I'm kind of thinking of a couple of things, and I'm going, okay. 15 years ago, I may have stayed the night with a gal, and she was a little surprised that I was sitting on her doorstep like a lost puppy dog the next day, and well, it's because she actually had my dog in her house. 15 years later, we're married, and we have lots of dogs. That one worked out okay. But if we take that and we look at it from that angle, one thing I didn't get to her house for, quite a while, was a key. I mean, it's not like she just said, hey, here's a key to the house and come and go and do your own thing. So it wasn't my home. It wasn't my abode by any means. I have my own place.
But even with the situation, she did not give the guy a key.
Yeah.
He did not have a key to the house.
Yeah, exactly. And so, because I know that there's certain things that we've come across, is are they getting mail? Do they have, how many things do they have? Do they have more than one set of shoes? Things like that. Something bothering you?
Well, I was looking, you were playing with your tactical key. I was like, where did I put mine?
I don't know.
I don't know either.
And the next thing that I kind of wanted to touch on is, and of course, the things that we've touched on today, we will go into more detail in future episodes.
Absolutely.
But, generational abusers.
Mm-hmm.
So, Dawn, do you want to start with that?
Well, a lot of people will argue that there is no such thing as generational abusers. I will tell you from both sides of the fence and from personal experience by growing up watching what my grandmother and my father and his siblings went through with my grandfather, and then watching what my father and his siblings, how they raised their kids. It is a generational thing, because when you grow up, is it nature or nurture? When you're raised by violence, you tend to be violent. It's like my bulldog. I raised my bulldog to be friendly, but she had one job to protect Amy and my daughter. My daughter is now gone, so now the only job for her is she protects Amy. But on the other hand, you raise a dog just for being friendly. Guard dogs are friendly. Guard dogs have a much greater sense of who means harm to them, because they can smell the pheromones. They can smell the the adrenaline pumping through your veins when you're there to do something that you're not supposed to be doing. So I would have to agree that generational abusers need an opportunity to learn. But the problem I faced for many years is I have visited more than my share of counselors, my share of therapists. And they always made excuses for me because, one, they were afraid of me. I was never really a physical abuser. I was more a mental and verbally abusive. I was a terrorizer, basically. I would get a crazy look in my eye and, lose my temper, and people were afraid of what I was going to do, so people never wanted to piss me off. And I can never make up for all the bad things I did in my life to my exes. Because I was a horrible person. I was raised by a pathological, psychopath, narcissistic asswipe. So I thought from a very young age, when my dad would take me with him as his cover, and he would always tell me from a very young age that women could not be faithful for more than 3 years. That was his excuse for cheating on my mom. Now, that affected me my whole life until I met my stepdaughter. Well, she wasn't my stepdaughter then. She was Amy's daughter before we ever started dating. She changed my life by doing a school project, and I realized at the end of that project how screwed up I was, because it asked how many times, at the bottom of it, it was, how many times have you been married? Well, I'd been married 4 times. How many times have you been divorced? 4. How many times have you had a serious relationship fail? Well, there was at least 7 I could count at that time had failed. So that was 11 failed relationships from the time I was 20 years old to the time I was 44, 43, 44. Those were serious relationships. And then it asked, why did they fail? Well, I believed I always picked the wrong kind of woman. And this kid puts it as a fraction, 11 over 1, and flipped it around, 1 over 11, and said, mathematically, this is impossible. And I'm sitting there like, what? It's not my fault. My father told me as a man I was always right, And she said, it'd be like reaching into a basket and pulling out 11 bad apples. Well, that sent me into a depression that lasted about 5-6 days, because I had realized I had become my father's son. What I was doing was not right. I was emulating the one person I resented the most. And that sent me into a depression that was nearly a suicidal depression, because I had become him. I changed how I was driving the car that day. I changed how I was looking in the mirror. I was changing how I was sitting. I was changing how I held the steering wheel. I was changing everything about me, and I hated the fact when I got to my hotel that day that when I looked in the mirror, I seen him looking back at me. I was like, oh my God, what a horrible curse. I look like him. I can't change the fact that I resembled his look. So then I started changing everything about me. I was letting my face grow out. After 5-6 days sitting in a hotel room, a young girl came up and knocked on the door. She was a bartender in a hotel. And it was a fun game every day when I went home, or every day when I went back to the hotel, because I lived in Georgia, but I was working in Texas. I'd go by and I'd flirt with her. I was management material. I was always dressed in slacks, button-up shirt. I'd always flirt with this girl. She was 22 years old. I was 43, 44 years old. Never going to score, right? But it was fun. It was fun entertainment to go there every day and wind down and go up to my room and get some sleep. Well, after the 5th day of not showing up at the bar, this little girl comes up, knocks on my door. I'm like, go away, I don't want to see nobody. Well, she had stopped by the front desk and got a room key. When I answered back and I told her to go away, she's like, no, I'm not going away. I need to check on you because you hadn't been by the bar in 5-6 days now. I need to make sure you're alive. And I said, go away. So I hear her slide the key in the door, right? She come in, she's like, oh my God, it's hot in here and this room smells like ass. And I'm like, I don't even want to live. I said, I'm just a horrible person. She goes, what are you talking about? She goes, you're a great person. I said, no, I have become my father's son. And she chuckled and she goes, no kidding, whose son are you going to be? I said, no, you don't understand. I told her a little bit about my dad and about my history and everything. And this girl, she stands there for a moment and she took one step forward and she put her hand on my shoulder. And she said, as a survivor, I can forgive you. Now you have to forgive yourself. And a couple of tears ran down her cheek and she said, I need you to come downstairs and talk to somebody. Like, I ain't going nowhere. Well, she drugged me out of bed, told me to get a shower. And while I was getting a shower, she ordered us food. So the food was down there at the bar when we got down there a little bit later. And at the table, there were 3 beers, 2 baskets. One was chicken wings and one was those mozzarella sticks. And 3 beers. I was like, why is there 3 beers? There's only 2 of us. So I was waiting to see who was coming. Well, we get down there, we sit down, and here comes her boyfriend that works in the back. He come out and he sat down and she said, I want you to do me a favor. I want you to tell him a little bit about what you told me upstairs about what changed your life and why. Who you were and what changed your life. So I'm sitting there, I'm telling this story, or I'm telling my testimony, because it's not a story, it's a testimony. And he begins to cry and reaches across the table and grabs her by the hand and says, oh my God, I can't believe how badly I treated you. And she says, you have saved your first person. Now as a man, I'm challenging you to go out and tell other men how their actions are so wrong. That when they've been raised by someone the wrong way, they need an opportunity to become someone different. So 10 years ago, at the lowest point in my life, I changed my life. And then a year later, we end up dating and being married now for 9 years. We're going on a 10-year relationship, and I've never had a relationship last past 3 years because my dad embedded that in my head that no woman could be faithful for more than 3 years. So I was messed up. I was messed up from the word go. So that's why I am here to do what I do now, and I fight for those who can't fight for themselves. And that's why having you as a member of the team, and having Amy as a member of a team, and having the others that aren't here today, I believe that we can change the world. And I think that we're going to do a lot of good. So, I don't know, people may like me because of my testimony, people may hate me because of my testimony, but it's a reality. So is generational abuse a thing? Yes. Can you change? Only if you want to change. And that's what I would tell every young girl out there today, and every young guy, is when someone says, can abusers change? Yes. But they have to want to change. And you have to allow people to hold you accountable, because I allow everyone to hold me accountable. 1, because I tell my testimony. 2, everyone that I come in contact with knows that if I mistreat her, I want them to, 1, lay hands upon me, not for healing, or call the cops, because under no circumstances should the stronger person beat on someone who's weaker just to make themselves feel stronger. That is a hollow feeling. And I don't know when women quit being princesses and became punching bags. But I can tell you this, that in the generations that I have talked to through this, it has amazed me, and I am no longer shocked by anything anybody tells me. that most every single time men who are abusive were raised by abusers. And women who are abusive are usually financially abusive and have been raised by someone who was the breadwinner in a family. And that is the main way that women dominate men. But now I do have two men I have worked with here in San Antonio who one of them, his wife constantly hits him with a broomstick from his knees to his nipples, so to speak, when he's sleeping because she doesn't want him to ever have an affair or get naked in front of another woman. And we have had some that were vindictive and got even after we got involved. So, it takes accountability. It takes people holding you accountable. It takes you allowing people to hold you accountable. And I would truly be disappointed if Matt or one of my other board members or anyone who knows me ever let me get away with something like that ever again. And it's not easy telling that testimony. And I can never make up for what I've lost. I've lost 5 marriages, or 4 marriages. Oh, not looking for number
Really?
6 yet. I've lost 4 marriages. I lost 7 serious relationships. I've had stepchildren that I cared about that I lost. I've lost 2 biological daughters that don't speak to me. So, you can and you will lose a lot of things if you don't change.